Well, we are fucked, to say the least. Rishi Sunak has done two things which should absolutely terrify you and also terrify both my cats. In November, the COP27 United Nations conference is going to take place. Now, that couldn't be more important or more pressing because of the small matter of the existential threat facing human civilization. It's not a trivial matter, that, whether we survive as a species. Now, Rishi Sunak has announced he's not going. Busy guy. So he can't take out maybe just a couple of days, just to deal with a small matter of an existential threat. Now, no one's denying there aren't pressing things to deal with because the Conservative Party have detonated the British economy and caused general social and economic mayhem for several years now. They've certainly put in the hours. But nonetheless, I do have to keep emphasising this. I would argue that the survival of our species is pretty important. Now, the second thing he's done is demote the climate minister, Alok Sharma. Now, he's a Tory. I'm no fan of the Tories. He did receive plaudits, I have to say, when he held the COP presidency. We're talking, of course, COP27, United Nations Climate Conference. He held the COP presidency after the last event in Glasgow. He no longer attends cabinet. So as far as the British government under Rishi Sunak is concerned, the climate is not important enough to merit having someone specifically there at cabinet to talk about it. Now, frankly, if they were taking it seriously, every policy that the government did, housing, transport, health, you name it, would be seen through the prism of climate. We would always look at every single policy to see how it helps deal with a climate emergency. This would, of course, provide opportunities because things like affordable transport, publicly funded and run affordable transport, for example, as well as creating skilled jobs in renewable energy. These are good for our living standards. They're good for the future of the planet. Now, as if to underline just how tragic this is, how devastating this is, how lethal it is for our future, this is the same day, these two announcements, that the UN Environment Agency has declared there is no way, as things stand, based on what governments are currently doing, to prevent global temperatures from rising 1.5 centigrade above pre-industrial levels, over which there's a scientific consensus. Beyond that, we really are in the shit. Let's be honest about it. Carnage awaits.
Apocalyptic scenes in the south of France. Severe drought and summer heat waves seen across Europe.
Now, it's striking, of course, that Tory rhetoric about not putting debt on the future generations, when obviously what they're doing is they're forcing future generations to pay for the terrible failures of the present to deal with the climate emergency. Now, if, and this is really important, if, as is noted by the UN Environment Agency, the current climate pledges for action from governments, so these are what governments have already signed up to tackle the climate emergency, i.e. insufficiently, temperatures will rise about 2.5 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. What does this mean? I think it's really important to talk about what this actually means in practice, because if you have 2 degrees of warming, for example, then global sea levels will rise by 56 centimetres. Now, that actually in itself has devastating consequences. Beyond that, you're talking about, given how many urban settlements are on coastal areas, the mass displacement of millions of people, that's villages as well, towns, cities, from their homes. We're talking about the mass destruction of marine life. We're talking about mass heat waves with the death that causes. We're talking about drought. We're talking about floods. We're talking about the destruction of crops and subsequent famine. We're talking about destabilised ecosystems. We're talking about extreme weather, cyclones, tornadoes, hurricanes, you name it. All of this, of course, will bring terrible, terrible economic devastation. But you know, the thing is, and this is a really important point, because we have a prime minister now who is twice as well off as the king, and the rich will always find ways to protect themselves. This is a class issue. The climate is a class issue because, of course, globally, those most devastated are the poor. But in the global north, in these richer countries, it will also be the poor who will be themselves most devastatingly affected by the sharp end. And what also global north countries are going to do is so obvious, you don't need to write what's going to happen. And anyone who's seen Children of Men has a pretty good idea, which is as people are forced from their homes because of climate emergency, disproportionately caused by the emissions of the global north, people fleeing in countries most devastated will be kept out by fences and violent borders in the global north. That is where this is heading, a dark and gruesome place. The British government is obviously, I mean, this isn't the powerful nation it once was, but it has a lot of global influence, potentially, if it seeks to use it. And by failing to take leadership on the climate emergency, it's condemning its own people and people across the world to a far darker future than would otherwise be the case. You should be angry and you should be scared, because this is playing Russian roulette with the future existence of humanity. And we already see now the extreme weather events. We already see the impact of global warming to this point. But when it goes way beyond this point, we're in trouble. And the decisions of Rishi Sunak to demote his climate minister and not turn up to the global climate conference, that will be very much something which signifies a lack of willingness to do anything about it. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.